I'm Jesse Weber, and look who's joining me, Julie Rendelman. What a day we have for you. A lot to get through, so let's get started. All right, where do we go with this, Julie? I mean, he has been very outspoken throughout everything that's happened. What is he going at here? Why is he upset?
I really like the go about your business now.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's better than some of the things he said in open court.
He's clearly not happy with the judge, and he's expressing it. Look, I mean, he's making a record. One would argue that he's making an appealable record because he's bringing up some issues of mental illness. And by the way, the behavior indicates some level, maybe, of mental illness. Some would say he's quite manipulative. But it could raise some flags when it comes to an appeal. That
was outside the presence of the jury, so it's not like they'll have a chance to say, oh my gosh, look, he's making these crazy comments, he must be insane. But here's the thing. This guy, I can't tell the relationship between him and his attorney. At one point, they have a very close relationship, but then he's criticized his attorney at other points during this case, and here seems to be a prime example. If he's making these objections on his own, you can see how uncomfortable, I mean, it appears as a defense attorney is. Is this later on grounds for him saying, I didn't have effective counsel?
Probably not. I mean, look, there's always going to be an appealable issue. Keep in mind, he's now been convicted. So, you know, he's going to feel a little bit differently about his attorneys at this stage than he did before. And I don't think it's unusual through different stages of the process that a defendant and an attorney are not going to always see eye to eye on things. And this is just a prime example. And I think he's frustrated.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's start from the beginning, from yesterday as we wait to go live. This was the prosecution's opening statement in the penalty phase. Remember, they believe the appropriate sentence here should be death. Let's go. Now, Julie, I was surprised. The prosecution put on a rather short case in the sentencing phase. They maybe calls 3 witnesses. We're going to play the testimony of one of them in a minute, the officer who, said that he was hit. He was actually hit in the face by Markeith Loyd back in the 90s. Is that because the state just feels we have enough here? We really think that this is appropriate for death. We don't have to put on an even longer case.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes they don't have that much, and when I say they don't have that much, they have specific, succinct things that they're bringing out to the jury, and they think that coupled with this case is enough. Again, there's another case that we know about, and so perhaps they don't know if they're so sure of this, but they know, by the way, there's another one potentially coming.
And you can only, I mean, practically, from a practical point of view, if he's sentenced to death in 2 different trials, it's
it's a done deal.
The thing is, though, here, I mean, does this case seem prime where a jury will vote in favor of that? I mean, we've seen all different kinds of horrific cases before, and sometimes we're surprised when a jury comes back and recommends life in prison. Then again, we're talking here about the killing of a young woman and her unborn child. I think
the problem with this case, and I'm opinions about death penalty aside, is that there's more to this story in terms of, the fact there were arguments that she had a gun in the house. There was just a little more that makes the jury, even though they find him guilty of the actual crime, there may be just a touch of mitigation in this case, just a touch.
A little sprinkle of mitigation.
A sprinkle, we're going to call it a sprinkle.
We're going to talk about that mitigation. But before we go there, let's go back to Todd Herb. So this became an interesting moment yesterday when he took the stand and recounted what happened back in the late 90s after a traffic stop gone bad. What you're going to hear is what he had to say, and if we have time, we're going to talk about what happened under cross-examination. Julie, what did you make of his testimony? Because later on, the defense said that this is a guy who's racist, that just wanted to pull over Markeith Loyd because he's black, that he didn't appreciate the fact that Markeith Loyd had an injury. He said, my arm hurts, and yet he ignored that. And that really there was no need to do any of this, and that ultimately it was because of his words that they were able to secure a multi-year conviction against Markeith Loyd.
Well, it depends on the jury and what the jury looks and the makeup, because some jurors are going to be affected by this and the call to racism, and some people aren't. Some people have issues with police officers and some don't. I have to be honest, while obviously it's a violent struggle, I'm not sure that it raises the level to a death penalty case. I understand it's a bad thing he did, arguably in the past, but I'm not sure that we get to death penalty based on this case.
But doesn't it just tell a story of Markeith Loyd, who, here's what the jury should know should know. They now know about this. They convicted him of the murder of Sade Dixon, of attempted murder of her brother, of firing at that house, killing her unborn child. They know that he engaged in a shootout with Deborah Clayton. They don't know the end result of that.
Correct.
So here they find a man who's continually breaking the law, and he was on probation at the time of killing Sade Dixon.
I understand that, but there is a viewpoint, devil's advocate, that a lot of African Americans are stopped for no reason, and
Absolutely.
so this can play into that. And so, does it bring us to that level? I'm not sure it does. I mean, quite frankly, if the jury was hearing about what happened to the officer that was actually killed, I think we'd have a very different result. But they're not going to.
Right. No, and as they should not know that, and
Correct.
they should not take that into consideration. But the defense is raising some very interesting points. We're going to take a break. I'm getting word that we're going to be able to jump live into court. We believe the defense is calling a doctor to talk about the mental makeup of Markeith Loyd. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.